Before the marble and the empire, before the Caesars and the legions, there was a river, the Tiber, winding through a land of low hills, forests and scattered tribes. And on its banks, where fog clung to the reeds, destiny waited. The story of Rome does not begin with certainty. It begins with myth, a story so ancient that the truth has dissolved into legend. It begins with Troy and with fire. When the great city of Troy fell to the Greeks, its towers shattered and its people scattered across the earth. Among them was a single man destined to carry the flame of that civilization westward, Aeneas, Prince of Dardania. Guided by omens and divine will, he escaped the burning city with his father Anchises on his back, his young son Aeneas by his side, and the sacred household gods in his hands. Behind him the smoke of Troy's ruin painted the sky red, but ahead of him lay a promise whispered by the gods, a new home and a new beginning. Aeneas wandered for years, his small fleet battered by storms and hunger. He reached Carthage, where Queen Dido welcomed him with kindness. For a brief time love blossomed between them, until the gods intervened. Jupiter reminded Aeneas that his destiny lay not in Carthage, but in Italy. When he sailed away under moonlight, Dido cursed him and his descendants, praying that enmity would forever exist between her people and his. Centuries later, that curse would echo across the Mediterranean as Rome and Carthage fought for domination. Aeneas at last landed on the shores of Latium, in central Italy. There he founded a small kingdom and united the scattered tribes. His descendants ruled for generations, until one fateful day a new story began, the story of Romulus and Remus. Many years later in the city of Alba Longa, there lived a princess named Rea Silvia. Her uncle, King Amulius, feared that she might bear children who would one day challenge his throne. To prevent this, he forced her to become a Vestal virgin, sworn to serve the goddess Vesta and remain childless. But the god Mars, lord of war, saw her beauty and claimed her. From their union came twin sons, strong, restless and divine. When Amulius learned of their birth, he was filled with fear and rage. He ordered the infants to be drowned in the Tiber. The servant charged with this cruel act placed the twins in a basket and set them adrift. But fate had other plans. The river, swollen from spring rains, carried the basket gently downstream, until it came to rest at the base of the Palatine Hill, caught in the roots of a fig tree. There something miraculous happened. A she-wolf, a creature sacred to Mars, found the crying infants and, instead of killing them, fed them with her milk. For days she protected them in her den beneath the hill, until one day a shepherd named Faustulus discovered the scene. He and his wife Acalarentia took the boys in and raised them as their own. Romulus and Remus grew up among the shepherds of the Tiber Valley, wild, strong, and fiercely loyal to one another. They learned to fight wolves and bandits, to hunt and to lead. They were natural rulers, and soon the other shepherds followed them. But there was always something different about the twins, a spark, a destiny that even they could not explain. One day, during a quarrel with local herdsmen, Remus was captured and brought before King Amulius himself. When Romulus came to rescue him, the truth of the birth was revealed. With the help of their grandfather Numitor, they overthrew Amulius and restored justice to Alba Longa. But the twins did not stay. They longed to build a city of their own, a city that would one day surpass all others. They returned to the place where the she-wolf had saved them, beside the bend of the Tiber, where 7 low hills rose above the plains. It was there that their destiny awaited. Romulus favored the Palatine Hill, while Remus preferred the Aventine. To decide, they turned to the gods and watched the sky for omens. Remus claimed to see 6 vultures, Romulus 12. A sign, he said, of divine favor. The dispute turned bitter, pride inflamed by rivalry. As Romulus began to build the first walls of his new city, Remus mocked him. In defiance, he leapt over the unfinished wall, taunting his brother. Romulus, enraged, struck him down. His brother fell, and in that moment Rome was consecrated with blood. Standing over Remus' body, Romulus whispered words that would echo for centuries. "So perish all who cross my walls." The act haunted him for the rest of his life. Yet from that grief a kingdom rose, one born from the union of divine will, human ambition and tragedy. On the 21st of April, 753 BC, Romulus founded the city of Rome. He traced its boundaries with a plow, marking the sacred line that would one day encircle the largest empire on earth. He established the Senate, a council of elders to guide him. He created the first Roman legions, organizing men by tribe and rank. And he opened the city's gates to all, fugitives, wanderers, exiles. From them, he built a nation not of one race or one faith, but of many. The early Romans saw themselves as chosen not by birth but by destiny. Anyone willing to serve, to fight, and to build could become Roman. It was this idea, inclusion bound by discipline, that would one day make them unstoppable. Romulus ruled for nearly 4 decades. When he disappeared one day during a storm, the people believed he had been taken up to heaven by the gods. They built a temple for him and worshipped him as Quirinius, protector of Rome. And so ended the life of Rome's first king, and began the age of kings that would shape the city into power and legend. The city Romulus left behind was still young, a patchwork of huts, alleys, and shrines surrounded by fields and forests. Rome needed rulers, and so began the age of the 7 kings, each one leaving behind something of himself that would shape the city for centuries. After the warrior king Romulus came Numa Pompilius, gentle and wise. He wanted no crown, yet the people begged him to rule. Under his reign, Rome laid down its sword and learned the language of the gods. Numa built temples, established priesthoods, and taught the Romans reverence for order and ritual. He divided the year into months, dedicated days to the gods, and gave meaning to the cycle of time. He appointed the Pontifex Maximus, the high priest who would oversee all sacred rites. He founded the Temple of Janus, whose doors would stand open in war and closed in peace. And for 40 years those doors remained closed. Rome learned stillness. It learned that the strength of a city lies not only in conquest but in faith. When Numa died, the people said he had spoken often with the nymph Egeria, who whispered divine counsel to him in secret groves. Whether or not this was true, Rome believed it, and belief was power. After peace came fire. The 3rd king, Tullus Hostilius, was the opposite of Numa, restless, fierce, born for battle. He scorned temples and prayers, calling them weakness. He restored the army and declared war on Alba Longa, the ancient mother city of Rome. The war was decided by a single combat between 3 Roman brothers, the Horati, and 3 Albans, the Curiati. 2 Romans fell, leaving one, the last Horatius, to face all 3 enemies alone. Feigning retreat, he struck them down one by one. Rome triumphed, and Alba Longa was destroyed. Its people were brought to Rome, their gods and customs absorbed into the growing city. But Tullus' pride grew. When lightning struck his house, it was said Jupiter himself had punished his impiety. Rome learned that the favor of the gods could never be taken for granted. Next came Ancus Marcius, grandson of Numa, who sought to balance war and peace. He fortified the city's hills, built the first bridge over the Tiber, and founded Ostia, the harbor that would connect Rome to the sea. He expanded Rome's territory without cruelty, welcoming conquered peoples as citizens. He wrote Rome's laws on wooden tablets and displayed them publicly, a symbol of justice shared. Under Ancus, Rome began to feel less like a cluster of villages and more like a living organism, a city of trade, temples, and families bound by common purpose. The river that had once carried 2 helpless infants now carried ships filled with grain and salt. The city had begun to breathe. When Ancus died, an ambitious Etruscan named Lucius Tarquinius Priscus took the throne. He was not born Roman, but destiny seemed to favor him. As a child, an eagle had swooped down and taken his cap, only to return it moments later, a sign from the heavens that he would one day wear a crown. Tarquinius brought with him the artistry and the engineering of Etruria. He began great works that would define Rome for centuries. He drained the marshes between the hills, creating the Forum Romanum, the heart of Roman life. He built the Circus Maximus, where horses thundered before roaring crowds. And he ordered the construction of the Cloaca Maxima, the massive underground sewer that still flows beneath the city today. He surrounded himself with advisors, wealth, and pageantry. Purple robes, golden crowns, ivory thrones, these symbols of kingship entered Rome with him. Under Tarquinius, the city became a true capital, not just a settlement of men, but a statement to the gods. After Tarquinius' assassination, the throne passed to Servius Tullius, once a slave in the royal household. Legend says that as a boy his head caught fire while he slept, yet he was unharmed, a divine sign of greatness. Servius became one of Rome's most beloved kings. He divided the citizens into classes based on wealth, assigning each its military and civic duties. He created the census, recording every Roman's property, family, and obligations. He expanded the city and encircled it with the Servian Wall, Rome's first great fortification, vast stone ramparts that would stand for centuries. But his reforms bred resentment among the nobles, who saw their privilege threatened, and waiting in the shadows was Tarquinius' son, Lucius Tarquinius Superbus, the Proud. Tarquinius seized the throne through murder and ruled as a tyrant. He silenced the Senate, filled his palace with spies. He trusted no one, feared everyone, and saw in every shadow a rival waiting to strike. The Senate he reduced to silence. The people he ruled through fear. He finished what his father had begun, the gleaming temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus, vast enough to swallow 100 men in its marble halls. Its gold reflected the morning sun, but beneath that radiance lay the darkness of oppression. He made slaves of citizens and citizens of slaves, forcing all to labor on his monuments. Those who whispered dissent vanished into the quarries. Yet pride has a way of blinding the powerful. While Tarquin built his temple to the gods, he forgot the gods were watching. In the 12th year of his reign, Tarquin marched against Ardea, a prosperous Latin city to the south. He set up camp outside its walls, but the siege dragged on for months. One evening, in the officer's tent, his son Sextus Tarquinius feasted and drank with the young Roman nobles. Boast met boast until the talk turned to their wives, which among them was most virtuous. Only one man, Collatinus, refused to boast. He simply said, "Come and see for yourselves." So, in the dead of night, the men rode from Ardea to Rome and on to Collatia. There they found Lucretia, Collatinus' wife, not feasting or adorned, but spinning wool by lamplight among her servants. She welcomed them with grace, blushed at their praise, and returned to her work. Her modesty struck them silent, but in Sextus' heart admiration curled into desire, a poisonous hunger for what he could not rightly have. A few nights later he returned alone. He came under the pretense of friendship. She offered him wine, hospitality, and respect as a prince of Rome. When the house fell silent, Sextus entered her chamber with a drawn sword. He spoke not of love but of power, that if she refused him, he would kill her and lay a slave beside her, claiming she was caught in sin. Lucretia pleaded for mercy, but the tyrant's will was iron. When the deed was done, he fled into the darkness, leaving behind a woman whose honor had been taken, but whose spirit remained unbroken. At dawn, Lucretia summoned her husband Collatinus, her father Spurius Lucretius, and their friend Lucius Junius Brutus. Before them she recounted what had happened. She begged them to seek justice, not for her sake alone, but for Rome's. Then, with calm resolve, she took a dagger from her robe and said, "Though my body has been violated, my soul is pure. No woman shall live after Lucretia to think unchastity a pardonable thing." She drove the blade into her heart. As her blood touched the floor, silence fell. Then Brutus stepped forward, lifted the dagger and raised his voice. "By this blood, most chaste before the crime, I swear before the gods, by Jupiter, by Mars, by this steel, that I will drive out Tarquin and his brood, that none shall ever again rule Rome as king." The men swore the oath. Lucretia's body was borne through the streets. The people, seeing her pale face and crimson robe, were seized by fury. Brutus, long thought slow-witted, for he had feigned dullness to survive Tarquin's paranoia, revealed his true nature. He called the people to arms, proclaiming that kings had brought only chains. The city echoed with the clash of shields and the cry of freedom. While Tarquin was still encamped at Ardea, the revolt swept through Rome like wildfire. The gates were seized, the palace taken, and the tyrant's statues torn down. When news reached the camp, Tarquin hastened north, but the legions refused him entry. The monarchy of Rome, 2.5 centuries old, fell in a single night of rage. The people met in the Forum, where Brutus and Collatinus addressed them. They declared that henceforth Rome would have no king, but 2 consuls, chosen yearly, equal in power, bound by law. Thus began the Roman Republic, born from blood, forged in oath. Tarquin sought allies among the Etruscans. He appealed to Lars Porsena, king of Clusium, promising gold and loyalty if he would restore the monarchy. Porsena agreed, and his armies marched upon Rome. The young republic faced its first trial. The Etruscans besieged the city, but the Romans held fast. When they tried to storm the bridge across the Tiber, a single soldier stood to face them, Horatius Cocles, defender of the bridge. With shield and sword he held the narrow span while his comrades hacked it down behind him. Arrows and spears rained upon him, but he did not yield. When the bridge collapsed, he leapt into the river, swam through the currents, and emerged on the Roman shore. His courage saved the city and became legend. Soon after, Porsena withdrew. Some said he admired the valor of his enemies more than the pleas of the exiled king. Rome had proven itself a city of citizens, not subjects. When peace returned, Brutus assembled the people once more. He proposed an oath to bind every Roman heart. No man shall call himself king in Rome. No crown shall rest upon a Roman head. We shall rule ourselves, and the law shall rule us all. The crowd raised their hands in solemn unity. In that moment, the identity of Rome changed forever. A city founded by shepherds and ruled by kings had become a republic of laws, of discipline, and of pride. Brutus would not live to see its long peace. Tarquin's remaining sons soon returned with foreign arms, and in battle Brutus fell, but his name endured as the father of Roman liberty. From the tears of Lucretia was born a nation that would one day rule the world. The kings had built its walls, but its people would build its soul. Rome had slain its king, but what comes after freedom is always fragile. When Tarquinius Superbus fled into exile, he left behind not peace but a void. A city that had known only one ruler at a time now had to learn the art of sharing power. Out of that chaos, the Roman Republic took its first trembling steps. In place of the king, the people elected 2 consuls, each with equal authority, serving for a single year. They wore the purple-bordered toga of the old kings, yet each could veto the other's commands. When one led the army, the other remained in the city to govern. Power was now balanced, not absolute. The Senate, once an advisory council, became the Republic's anchor. 300 elders, drawn from noble families, deliberated over war and peace, taxes and treaties. Their word was not law, but it was heavy as stone. And above them all stood a single principle, written not on marble, but in the minds of men. No one shall be king in Rome. The Senate declared that no citizen, not even a consul, was above the law. When war or crisis demanded absolute command, the Romans created a temporary office, the dictator, chosen by the consuls, serving for 6 months only. When the danger passed, he was expected to resign. This law would one day define Rome's difference from tyrants and kings. The Republic also bound its people by religion and ritual. The Temple of Jupiter became not a royal palace but a civic sanctuary. Before every decision, augurs read the flight of birds. Priests poured libations to the gods. The Romans believed their freedom endured only by divine favor and by discipline. The end of monarchy had unsettled all Italy. Rome's former allies, the Latin cities, questioned its loyalty. They feared the new republic would dominate them as the kings once had. The tension boiled into war. At Lake Regillus, around 496 BC, the armies met. The exiled Tarquin himself rode among the Latins, an old man now but burning with vengeance. The Romans, led by the consul Aulus Postumius, swore an oath before battle, that the gods would grant victory to the just. As the fighting raged, legend says Castor and Pollux, the divine horsemen, appeared upon white steeds, leading the Roman cavalry. When the dust settled, the Latins were broken. Tarquin's hopes shattered forever. The next day, 2 young riders, radiant, unearthly, were seen watering their horses at the Forum fountain before vanishing into air. In their honor, Rome built the Temple of Castor and Pollux, a reminder that the gods favored the free. But the enemy outside the walls was never as dangerous as the divisions within. The patricians, old noble families, held most of the power. The plebeians, farmers and craftsmen who filled the legions found themselves taxed, indebted, and voiceless. They could fight Rome's wars, but not guide its destiny. Resentment smoldered. When debtors were imprisoned or enslaved for unpaid loans, the plebeians abandoned the city en masse, camping on a nearby hill and refusing to serve in the army. Panic gripped the Senate. Rome without her people was defenseless. Negotiation followed. and from it emerged a compromise, the creation of the tribunes of the people, officials chosen by the plebeians themselves, with the sacred right to veto unjust decrees. These officials were inviolable. To harm a tribune was to offend the gods. This was the first crack in patrician rule, and the beginning of the long Roman struggle for equality. By the end of the 5th century BC, Rome had changed beyond recognition. No longer a kingdom, not yet an empire, but something new, something enduring. The Republic stood upon 3 pillars: the consuls who commanded and executed the laws, the Senate who advised and preserved tradition, and the people who voted, fought, and demanded justice. It was a delicate balance, and it worked only because Romans believed their freedom was sacred. They lived by a motto that would echo through all their history: SPQR, Senatus Populusque Romanus, the Senate and the people of Rome. From this fragile beginning, a civilization was being forged, not in marble or gold, but in duty, discipline, and law. The kings built her walls, but the people gave her purpose. Rome was no longer ruled, she ruled herself. The Romans did not yet know what they had built. They thought only of survival, of defending their fields, their families, their fragile liberty. Yet in the clay of their narrow streets, they had planted ideas that would outlive empires. Freedom, yes, but not anarchy. Law, yes, but not tyranny. Honor, yes, but not pride without purpose. These were the seeds that took root after 509 BC, watered by sweat and sacrifice. Each year the people elected new consuls. Each year they swore the oath that no man would ever be king. The Senate met at dawn beneath the echoing arches of the Forum, debating taxes, alliances, and ritual. The plebeians gathered in the field beyond the city walls to vote in their tribal assemblies. Every citizen knew that the fate of Rome rested not on the shoulders of one ruler, but on all. To the Romans, liberty was not leisure, it was labor. Freedom meant the duty to serve, to fight when called, to obey the law even when it cut deep. When enemies approached, the farmer laid down his plow, took up his shield, and became a soldier. When the harvest came, he returned, tilled his soil, and gave thanks to the gods. In that rhythm of war and peace, Rome found her heartbeat. From their ancestors, the Romans inherited a creed, short, stern, and unshakable. They called it Mos Maiorum, the way of the elders. It meant courage without boast, discipline without cruelty, piety without superstition. It meant that every man must be greater than himself, because Rome demanded it. At home, the father was pater familias, the guardian of household law. At dawn, he offered grain and wine to his household gods, the lares and penates. Even the humblest hut held a shrine, a reminder that family was the smallest republic of all. And above every door, invisible but ever-present, was Fortuna, the fickle goddess of chance. The Romans feared her, but they also respected her, for they believed the gods aided those who aided themselves. In the early republic, the legions were not yet legions. They were citizens with spears. But each campaign taught them the art of endurance. They faced famine, flood, and siege. They fought Latins, Volscians, Sabines, and Etruscans. Sometimes they won, often they bled. Yet every defeat became instruction, every scar a lesson carved in flesh. When other cities fell, Rome rebuilt. When other armies fled, Rome returned the next year. The gods, they said, favored the persistent. In that persistence lay the secret of their destiny. Though the Romans swore never again to serve a monarch, they did not erase the memory of their kings. They honored Numa for his wisdom, Servius Tullius for his justice, and even Romulus for his strength. Each had given something the Republic would keep. Religion from Numa, order from Servius, courage from Romulus. They learned from Tarquin too, for his arrogance and cruelty, for in remembering tyranny, they preserved freedom. The temples he built still shone on the Capitoline Hill, but now they belonged to the people. The throne was gone, yet the city remained, proof that institutions could outlive the men who founded them. By the dawn of the 5th century BC, Rome was no longer a cluster of huts. Stone walls encircled her. Markets thrived. Prayers rose with the smoke of morning fires. The Republic was young, imperfect but alive. From the ashes of monarchy, Rome had forged an idea that would travel farther than any army, that a city could govern itself. Her sons would call themselves citizens, not subjects. Her laws would outlast her borders, and the spirit born that day, on the blood-soaked floor of Lucretia's home, would echo through centuries. From myth she rose, from tyranny she broke free, and in the humble courage of her people, the eternal city began to dream of an empire.